We continue on our journey past the equator, as you put it last time. We passed the equator, volume 3, and only yesterday I was listening on the radio to an incredible song, and the words and the maturity, and let alone the music, from the 8-year-old Mozart. And the 8-year-old shouldn't surprise you when you consider that he wrote a harpsichord concerto at the age of 4 and a symphony at 5. Now, if that does not get people to question the divinity consciousness, if people cannot say there's more to life than just matter in motion and chemical interactions, surely that's an example. And one has to be inspired, deeply inspired by these masters to carry on one's own quest, but because it can be a bit of a hard journey sometimes, and one comes up against any amount of roadblocks. We all know that. But
Yes.
it certainly provides the incentive and the motive to
Rather than being inspired, I feel now we're often expired. We are expired.
That's a good way of putting it. Expired and exhumed.
Yes, and and you're right. Look, this very particular case you just bring, we just put it to the side so quickly. Well, who knows? Whatever. They had some kind of genius, something in the brain may have been on too early, too strongly, whatever. But like, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Yes, wait a lot.
Yeah, wait a lot.
Wait
Yes.
many minutes, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And we feel that the Hermetic Axiom that has been the mainstay of so many great people, from the great sages, of course, to Isaac Newton, is very much a key to understanding this.
Yes, and you devote chapter 5 of volume 3
Yeah, that's right, to
to
the
this, and the law of analogy.
analogy and correspondence. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you first, before we go into the Hermetic axiom and the
Mhm.
law of analogy, to
Mhm.
tell us once more, perhaps, what's an axiom and what's a law? Because these are words. Axiom, you don't hear
Yeah,
it so much. Maybe you hear it in mathematics. But law, we hear it in in jurisprediction and also in
right, right.
physics, the laws of mechanics. What's a law from an esoteric point of view?
Yeah, well, right. That's a very good question, Alex. And I would say an axiom is something that is almost cast in stone. You'd find it difficult to argue with it. But the law is the way it presents itself. So there are obviously laws in mechanics, the laws of light and optics. So there are the various manifestations in which these forces of nature will present themselves. So in a sense, a law is not something you argue with, otherwise it's not a law. But it's a different, slightly different from an axiom, which is taken as read, so to speak.
And I think this will become clear because this chapter and the following, they both of them have this tone about cascading,
Most certainly, Alex, flowing down,
flowing
flowing
down. And
down.
so
Yeah,
perhaps the law is something that flows down from
yeah,
the axiom, and we need to understand what that flowing down is.
yeah, sure.
Yes.
So, if we just ask the Hermetic axiom, too popularly translated as above, so below, as below, so above. But how does this come into being if it were not the case that fundamentally there is only one organic being? I'm referring to the whole cosmos, the whole galaxy, everything, as one living organic being. Now, the great Newton put it very beautifully in terms of our Earth. He said, our Earth is like a great animal. And in those days, you spelled animal with two L's, breathing inspiring and expiring. And, it just makes nonsense that Newton regarded the Earth and the planet as a mechanical system. That was just the interpretation. But anyway, he was pointing to the Earth and by implication the cosmos as a living organic being. So if, as Blavatsky put it so beautifully, fundamentally there is one being, one creature, one organic consciousness, there has to be a relationship between the different parts. So each part affects the other, and the lower will affect the higher principles, and the higher principles will also reflect and project and flow down into the lower. And science, of course, has shown this deep fundamental interconnection and interdependence. Of course, quantum physics in physical science, but Merlin Sheldrake, Rupert's brilliant son, in his book on fungi, has shown what's the title of his book?
Entangled
Lives.
Lives.
Entangled Life. So the fungus is the largest organism apparently on Earth. So with the Hermetic Axiom, it implies analogy, which is a similarity but differences in proportion, like the sephirothic tree of the Kabbalah and the human body. And besides analogy, we have correspondence, which means the same in proportion, sleeping and waking states.
Yes, so it comes to mind this idea of organic similarity, right?
Yes, organic similarity, interconnection, interdependence. Yes.
That the nature of relations and relationships that take place within an organism or within a machine are quite differently.
Yes.
And so I'm not surprised. I'm happy to hear that from an esoteric point of view, the view is very much like one of my favorite philosophers, Alfred North Whitehead.
Whitehead, most certainly.
Yeah, it's intrinsically organic in that way.
Yeah, Whitehead was not lacking in a sense of humor. Didn't he once say that those who make it their purpose to convince all of us about how purposeless life is are subjects for interesting study?
Yes.
But again, the great Christ in the Bible put it so beautifully, whatever you do to the least amongst you, you do unto me.
Mm-hmm.
And those people who sneer at religion need to sneer at themselves.
Yes. So that's not represented, but that's formulated in the Hermetic principle.
Yes.
This fundamental inner relatedness of everything at all levels.
Mm-hmm. At all levels, yes. Right.
All right.
Which is why one of the instructions is learn the formula before you sum the series. So an algebraic formula is a statement of universals at any level.
Mm-hmm.
So the simplest formula we learned at school is distance equals speed times time. And you can apply that on the moon or on Earth or on Venus. But you can only travel and know how far you're going if you first know your formula. So you first reduce everything to terms of consciousness and then learn the formula before you sum the series. And the whole of the occult doctrine, in one sense, can be regarded as a spiritual algebraic formula. It can't provide all the details, nothing can. But by providing the formula, you see how the series will unfold.
And in that sense, the very Hermetic principle speaks about esoteric versus exoteric science, because in a way they correspond. Because in science, the Western exoteric science, it's a quest for universals. I mean, all of that is shared.
It absolutely, in Western science, they are passionately trying to find the theory of everything. And it is an unconscious admission, isn't there, that there is this universal law.
Yes.
But whereas science, the reductionist science, wants to reduce everything to elementary particles, esoteric science is reductive in the sense of reducing everything not to elementary material particles, but principles, but elementary principles.
Yes.
And if you like, occult science talks about spiritual particles.
Yes, reducing from above or reducing from
Yeah,
below.
yeah.
At the beginning of this chapter 5, you speak about this mandate that
Yeah.
surprised me. You tell us more about it.
Um, Remind me what the mandate is.
Well,
Oh no, reduce everything to terms of consciousness.
oh yes, but
I've just said it. Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
but it sounded. Let me just go and look
Well,
at it.
there again, we have axiom, law, and mandate.
Yes,
It's an instruction on how to apply the law.
yeah, the divine mandate, right?
Yeah,
The way of occult science.
yeah.
Because like the word mandate can sound strange to some of that, but it's this way of reducing or of relating.
Relating. Yeah.
Yes,
I think yes. The mandate is three things. Reduce everything to terms of consciousness. Apply the key of analogy as above so below, and learn the formula before you sum the series. Yes, that's the
yes,
mandate.
yes. It's kind of a divine recipe.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
that's right. I like it.
Mm,
I'm going to make a note of that divine recipe. Well said. Just give me a second.
sure.
Right. Keyword, divine recipe.
Okay. So there are a few correspondences here between the
Mm.
human and physical nature.
Yes, that's right.
Again, I was surprised to see relations with sounds and colors and also
Yes, yes,
elements, chemical
yes,
elements.
yes. Because fundamentally, one has to just bear in mind that we are dealing ultimately with just modes of vibration of one consciousness, consciousness stroke substance, energy matter, so to speak. And colors, sounds, matter are all variations in that fundamental consciousness substance. And those who genuinely can generate's the wrong word. Those gifted with occult powers, real occult powers, are the ones who know these resonances between the various states and therefore can use it for a particular purpose. A very good example of that, not occult powers, in healing, in medicine, there is a branch of medicine which I would really like to see given more credence and funding, and also it's cymatics, where an organ disease means dis-ease, out of ease. Every organ has its natural vibratory state, and when it's out of kilter, that vibratory state is off kilter. So by imposing the healing vibration, you restore that organ to its natural state. And I saw demonstrations of that quite often. Not quite often, a few times, by Peter Guy Manners, who was a leading cymatics practitioner. But all of this is not taken seriously. It's not a drug therapy, and there's no money, therefore. So that's an example of using healing vibration for the body. But I would really say, Àlex, in a very general sense, the loving touch of a mother or father over a sick child is another manifestation of a vibration, a healing vibration.
Mm. When you
So,
were
there are all of these relationships, yes, between colors, sound, planets, metals, everything. Sorry,
No, I
interrupting.
was going to now step back to the divine recipe, right,
Yeah,
or the mandate, because now it makes more sense, right? Because if one has the, as you were saying, the algebraic
mm,
formula,
mm,
then the little instances after that belong there. And so
yeah,
it's not strange to conceive elements, chemical elements, sounds,
mm,
colors, and all the rest
mm,
as just different manifestations of that very same principle if we start with the principle. If we start somewhere else,
mm.
then these are disparate things. Every one of them should be studied by their own discipline,
Exactly.
and we'll see how we put them back together in
Yeah,
the end. And
yeah,
we won't.
yes, yes, we won't. Yes,
Hmm.
yes, that's very, very well put. Yeah. Mm.
You want to say more about the I'm intrigued by oxygen, nitrogen,
Ha,
and the
ha.
correspondence. I mean, I'm a physicist, and so we also
Yeah,
learn
yeah, I
chemistry,
know.
and
Yes, yeah.
it's fascinating and
Mm,
still strange to me, right?
mm,
To
mm.
see that explicitly
Yeah.
elements be
And
spoken
human.
about in such terms.
Yes. Well, gosh, let's start at the lowest end in one sense. The physical body, Sathula Sharira, which means the gross carrier, the gross bulky form that wastes away, the physical body of gross matter is formed and it's molded over the etheric body, the model body. It provides the physical basis of all other life forms. So carbon is the fuel, so to speak, par excellence. It's the basis of all organic substances, and it's the chemical compound that forms just about the chemical element that forms the largest number of compounds and largest variety of compounds. So then if we move up a bit, if you like, the life essence, prana, the vitality, is the active power producing all vital phenomena in the human breath. Prana is the energy principle, the vitality, without which all our physical molecules would just be diverse molecules, not acting with animation and vitality. And so that activation corresponds with oxygen, which is the supporter of combustion and the life-giving element and the active chemical agent. It's the active chemical agent in organic life, not the passive chemical agent, which is nitrogen, when you need that as well. Now, the model body, the linga sharira, linga, the molding which wastes away, sharira, the model, linga sharira, the model body, the etheric double, which wastes away after death. That's the not the active, it's the inert model around which the human body is molded. And it dissipates after death, of course. And as an inert gas, nitrogen is the vehicle, so to speak, with which oxygen is mixed to dilute and adapt for our respiration. And it's a major component of several organic substances. So in this way, we can see the correspondences. So cutting a long story short, going right to the top, hydrogen is the lightest of gases. It burns in oxygen, of course, and enters largely into all organic compounds. And it corresponds with Kamarupa, the desire principle, which burns very fiercely during life in our lives as well. And it's inseparable from our existence. So one isn't making a sort of naive correspondence, but one sees the analogies, the correspondence between the principles of these the four most important elements, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, how they relate to the four manifest or mortal vestures of man, the physical body, prana, the model body, the desire body. But then if you go, of course, to the upper triad, there is no correspondence. Science has not yet discovered the causes of these phenomena. So the Atma Buddhi Manas, the divine spark, the spiritual soul, the higher mind, there is no physical correspondence, obviously not, because it's not physical. And this is why Blavatsky, in her beautiful way, has said that now that these physicists have explored nature in all her physical forms, it's time to move things to the higher plane and find out the noumena, the causes, the hidden influences behind what they've so wonderfully, expertly discovered as phenomena, noumena, phenomena to breathe out.
Wow. What an invitation. I mean, yeah, especially for those of us who are exploring what this future science may look like. This is a clear statement about it.
And just we talked about the human principles, but there is also higher correspondence with the cosmic principles, because just as we have our physical body, we have our earth, just as we have the model body, there is the astral light, and so on.
Well, thank you for walking through some of these and summarizing them, because this makes all these teachings a little bit more concrete. And as we were saying before we pressed record today offline, that to do exoteric science badly is bad enough, but to do esoteric science or occult science, it's shameful, it's terrible. And so these are really difficult things to convey properly.
They are, Àlex, yes. And the trouble is, if someone says something not foolish, but unclear or not properly argued in the esoteric field, it's very easy to tie everything with the same brush. Look, it's all a load of rubbish. Like in allopathic medicine, if one drug doesn't work, people say the drug didn't work, the others do. But dare one homeopath be found, for whatever reason, abusing his profession? All homeopaths are like that. So it's very easy to tar everyone with the same brush when they're not in your field and not in your camp. When they are in your camp, oh, it's just incidental.
Shall we move on to the cascading? And it's not any cascading, because it starts from the unmanifest.
Yes, it starts from the unmanifest, which is reflected, and these are words, of course, in the divine, and the divine is projected and reflected in the spiritual. And the spiritual, of course, is reflected in the temporal and the mortal. But the natural sort of conclusion from this is that the appearance of the manifest from the unmanifest does not in any way affect the unmanifest any more than a mirror would be affected by innumerable images in the mirror. So the unmanifest, that's almost like a paradox, because it's a radiation rather than a physical projection, of course. The unmanifest is unaffected by numberless manifestations. That wonderful, glorious saying in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says to Arjuna that however many ways I present myself, yet I remain. And again, paradoxically, the manifest is also whole and perfect because it's an emanation of the unmanifest. But such perfection and wholeness is not in the detail, but it's in the essential substance, which is consciousness.
Let me ask you two or maybe three things here. One
Sure.
is an anthropocentric, psychologized way of reading what you just said is,
Mhm.
oh, so if the ultimate doesn't really get affected
Yeah.
by the creation or manifestation, oh, he or she or it doesn't care about us.
It cares so much that it chooses not to be affected. If a parent were affected by a naughty child being rude to the parent, then the parent would not be doing its job, so to speak. The sunlight shines on sinner and saint alike,
Hmm.
out of compassion, you might almost say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Care, yes, but unaffected. Unaffected care.
Yes.
Compassionate, unaffected care.
It's kind of a sublimated
Yeah,
kind of
sure.
relating.
And your second question?
Yes, I was seeing that what you just said as well before. I was trying to draw through the Hermetic axiom the idea that as if as below and as above, so below,
Mhm.
then perhaps we should also strive for that kind of being unaffected. You see, so manifesting in the world and to the best of the possibility, right?
Well,
Not
yes.
caring about.
Yeah, hence the old saying to live in the world but not be of the world.
Mm,
Yeah, same thing. Mm.
yes.
And your third question?
Well, no,
So,
it
for
was more going around that very
great
particular
one.
one. If I got it more or
Yeah,
less
sure.
right, then we can try. So the first one was to psychologize that, but the second was, well, then let's take it into our own mode of being in the world,
Mm,
that
mm,
higher principle, how
mm,
we would apply it. And
mhm.
it's precisely that, right? You do things but let go. So you have all the intention and aspiration, but then you let go of consequence.
Yeah.
In a way, it's a manner of not being affected by what ends up happening.
It's the hardest, in my opinion, the hardest thing in life because the more one feels, the more intensely one feels, the more sensitive one is. It is so difficult to be emotionally robust, but emotionally highly tuned and sensitive.
Yes.
And I can only use the example, not the analogy, the example of the concert violinist, musician, or whatever, that despite your nerves, despite everything else, despite your sensitivity to the music, you cannot be affected by your nerves, by outward circumstances. Or if you like the surgeon, who has to be very empathetic but not sympathetic. If you're sympathetic, you'd be relating to the pain you're causing and you wouldn't do your job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is these fine dividing lines. Yes.
All right. Now, if you don't mind, we can move to chapter 6. We're
Yeah, yeah,
discussing
sure.
lately
Yeah.
two chapters on the
Mm,
same
yeah,
conversation.
sure.
And
Because they relate to each other. Yeah.
yes,
And
yes,
that's
as you chose them. This is Cosmogenesis, and then subtitle is Unfolding Consciousness,
yeah,
right?
that's right.
So it
Yeah.
feels like we get into this kind of
Mm, mm,
holographically.
mm,
This chapter 6 of volume 3 speaks about the entire volume 2 because it has the same
yeah.
title.
Mm.
How should we begin to unfold it?
Well, oh gosh. Well, first let's realize that man, meaning human beings, of course, in his innermost self is a miniature universe. So it's impossible to study man without at the same time studying cosmos and vice versa, of course. But the most important point to make is this flowing down, this projection. How according to the Hermetic Axiom, how all the various planes upon which man's various bodies are derived are really the mirror of corresponding planes in terms of the evolution of cosmos itself, and how the constitution of man is mirrored in these corresponding cosmic planes. So the evolution of cosmos and the evolution of man have got to be taken in step.
You clarify then, and we discussed this on our previous conversation, the differences between
Yes,
cosmos,
that's right.
universe, world,
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
on.
So again, yeah, thanks for asking that. That's important. Very simply, cosmos with a small c really relates to our solar system. In its objective aspect, cosmos with a capital C is our solar system in its objective and subjective. Now, cosmos with a K, small k, and similarly capital K, sorry, are the numberless universes, all the other solar systems that form the totality of what we might call the universe. And physical cosmology, to its great credit, has now come up with the multiverse idea, which is this umbrella term in physical cosmology, which includes not only the universe we live in, but also the hypothetical, all other possible universes, all of which, and that's a finding from particle physics, and not just someone's idea, cosmology and particle physics, that are, rather than being unique, our universe could just be one of many such universes. And the physical constants, like here we have the fine structure constants, gravitational constant, charges, and the electron. The constants in these other universes could be finely tuned for life in those different universes. Einstein's theory of general relativity arguably lends support to the idea of ripples in space-time and gravitational waves, which physicists think are giving birth to these pocket universes. There is a classic paper by Professor Bernard Carr, president of the Scientific Medical Network, providing a classical account of gravitational waves. And the most recent mathematical paper in support of the multiverse is by none other than Stephen Hawking and his co-worker Herzog, arguing that there could well have been multiple Big Bangs, of which our own universe is just one such event. Now, it's incredible that physical cosmology has come to this conclusion's the wrong word, this argument, this line of exploration. And for me, the most beautiful thing is it entirely relates to the occult doctrine on what is known as rounds. So in the Eastern Gupta Vidya, the Eastern books of knowledge, there is this quaint phrase, the older wheels rotated down and upwards. I'll explain that, I think. And we find the same idea in the Western Kabbalah, where various worlds are compared to the sparks that fly under the hammer of the great architect. Now, what are these older wheels that rotate down and then upwards? Wheels in this archaic terminology refers to the various world systems, globes. They're rotating down, meaning they are disintegrating. The older forms are wearing out, but they're also rotating upwards. So out of the disintegrating material of the older worlds, new worlds are being formed.
Let me ask you maybe a slightly metaphysical
Mm,
question. I wonder what esoteric teachings have to say
mm,
about this, because the idea of the multiverses, and I haven't read a lot about that, but it seems to me that it's a way of saying, well, we have the actual universe where we live in as we know it, as we possibly could know it.
mm.
And then there's another realm. I really like this word, the
Realm.
realm of the possible, of the virtual, which also has some sort of existence, but it's not just the kind of existence we enjoy here, which is actual existence. And by the way, this is how I like to think about quantum mechanics too.
Hmm, hmm.
After measurement and so on, which is really hard, we have what we have, and this is the collapse, the so-called collapse, to me means that these possibilities have actualized, they're actual here. And but before that, they existed, but they existed on another realm. They were
Yes.
possible, virtual.
Yes. Yes.
So, but then we just spoke about the unmanifest. So it seems that when we speak about existence, there are different ways of existing. This is so
Yeah.
interesting.
Existence means to stand out of, exist, to stand out of. But what are you standing out of in order to stand out of it? Unmanifest and subjective are not quite the same thing, because subjective from the etymology is to throw in front of someone. Objective is to throw
Hmm.
underneath, obisere, subisere. But unmanifest is not necessarily invisible, or it is invisible to those without the higher vision.
There's quite a lot of movement going on in all these words, and
Most
it's
certainly.
very deep and difficult and subtle, right? Because existing, you just mentioned, unfolding.
Which is
Mm,
why I like to start with clarifying terms as much as possible and
yes,
explaining the
yes.
etymology. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there are all these movements involved, and the way we understand them in our daily lives are very explicit,
Mm,
obvious, literal.
mm.
And but here they have all these different connotations
Yeah.
and denotations.
Hmm.
Can you unfold then a little bit more the idea of unfolding consciousness, which is what this chapter is about? What is it, and what is unfolding? Out of what is unfolding onto what is unfolding, and so on.
Um, Gosh. Well, let's just first consider the three characteristics of all the various planes of nature. Um, there is this emanational. Emanation is not the same as creation. It's really to press out of, like expression to press out of. So emanational emergence of these planes and the associated subplanes are like overtones of the parent or the loftiest plane of existence. And therefore, there must be relationship between cosmos and man, and humanity only functions on the lowest level of cosmos, so to speak. So if we again invoke the Hermetic Axiom, there's no reason why this analogous principle of human birth should not also apply on the grandest scale to cosmic birth or to various universes. So what is unfolding is the macrocosmic life form, which incubates, like the great mother, the microcosmic life forms, humanity and all the various kingdoms of nature. So the parent-child relationship is such an important one. It's another way of saying as above, so below. So that's what's unfolding. And in the Kabbalah, or Kabbalah, if some people pronounce it that way, there is the emanation unfolding from in the unmanifest world. You have the divine, the formless, and the world of spirit. But what is manifested are the archetypal worlds, the intellectual or creative world, the substantial world, and the physical world. So if we just come down to Earth, again, we see to create anything on Earth, whether it's a chemical plant, a computer, or the Channel Tunnel, there has to be this fourfold process. You have to ideate the vision, you have to put that in thought or as a plan, you then have to manage it, and then you have to build it. So if we apply this principle on Earth, why should not the cosmos correspond to those same principles? So in the great Kabbalah, the archetypal world is Olam. Olam is world. Atziluth. Olam Beria is the creative world. Olam Yetzirah is the substantial world. That's the equivalent of the model body, the model. And Olam Asya is the material world that corresponds. So that's what's unfolding.
Yes.
That was a very imperfect answer.
No, thank you. Thank you. It helps. And at the same time, I was reminding myself that all of that has to be experienced in order to be grasped.
Yes.
How
And
difficult.
one experiences by looking at one's own life and looking at the things one creates oneself.
Yes. Yes.
Before you build your house, what do? You vision it.
Mm.
Then what do? You think about the construction. Then what do? You gather raw material. But raw material doesn't make a house. Then you shape it. And then you live in it.
Yes.
You know, everything displays this sevenfold quality. And the sevenfoldness is anything but arbitrary because, as we explained earlier, it's based on mathematical law. I get it right this time, 2 to the n minus 1, where n is the number, 2 to the 3 minus 1 is 7. 2 to the 2 minus 1 is 3. So if you unfold a triplicity, you get the 7. You have 3 primary colors, you have 4 secondary colors, and the infinite hues of the sunset and the rainbow and all of that is just the 3 primaries and the way they're combined. In music, you have the sheen, the overtones rising from the one fundamental note. So similarly, the whole of cosmos and us displays this characteristic of the infinite subdivisions and sub-subdivisions of this sevenfold nature of unfolding. So where are we now? We are on the hottest part of the equator.
Yeah.
The next 2 chapters are just about the most, I don't want to put people off, but you can't, on the other hand, not be honest about it. They are difficult because they're talking about anthropogenesis. We talked of cosmogenesis, the birth and genesis of cosmos, but the birth and genesis of man from cosmos. And the next chapter, how is it that external input to the senses can result in a inner experience? And then I formulate this in terms of what I call the Schrödinger mind sensation problem, where Schrödinger, in his wonderful small little book, What is Life, said, I find the scientific picture very deficient. Science can describe in great detail how the waves of rarefaction and compression strike our eardrums, and then a neurological process goes to the brain. But why? Not how. Why does an old song move us to tears? Science is ghastly silent, but sometimes it gives us answers that are so silly that we don't take them seriously. Well, the whole point of these next chapters is to show that all our sensations are derivatives from divine consciousness
Yeah.
through the intermediaries. And intermediaries are so important, as in an electrical power station to a domestic consumer, you have the intermediary of transformers and all of that. You can't get a power station powering your bulb. It would explode it. You need intermediaries. So the divine consciousness works through intermediaries, the various hierarchies known as in the East as the Antrohans, in archangels, angels, various elementals that enact the divine law according to the divine plan. Because as the great Schiller said, the universe is a thought of the divine, and that great thought has overflowed into actuality. And if the divine thought has overflowed into actuality, the world born from that must display the divine impress, because it's nothing other than the divine thought. So it's the task of thinking people to try and discover this divine plan and thought.
And as you're saying, this constantly comes this image of that thing again cascading from above, and sometimes our inability or unwillingness to look up and acknowledge it. And this weird image came to mind, like as if it's raining and we're all paying attention to the drops falling on the floor and measuring things and so on. But why don't we just, look at the cloud, right? But there's no cloud. I'm looking down and I'm trying to analyze what's happening, and I cannot make sense of the rain because I don't want to look up, which is where these things are emanating from.
That's an excellent analogy, and all of these analogies are gold dust. Use different metaphor because they help the understanding. And when we look up, we might see a rainbow.
Yeah. No, it's a totally different way of constructing.
Yes, I'll make a note of what you just said. Yeah.
Well, I'm appreciating it because I definitely see it as an alternative way, and perhaps it then subsumes the way we're used to and we're taught. But an alternative way of proceeding
complementary,
in life and in science and so on, which is a top down more than a bottom up. And we love bottom up because we have these little things, and we, like a kid, we can put them together and make and grow them up, and we're so proud of our constructions. But yes, I feel in consciousness studies for sure we have all these drops and pods and areas, they're wet, and we're all running around like crazy ants because of the rain, but nobody really realized, like, hey, look, what's happening is that it's raining and there's a cloud up there. That's the cloud.
Yes. And where did the cloud come from, and what produced the cloud, and go on like that, of course.
Yeah, and your point about Blavatsky and the mirroring of exoteric science, and then at some point stopping of that mirroring because there's no land there for the more down to earth science to have a place is really interesting because I've been as you know, I'm working on some of these psychic phenomena, and I was by chance rereading Carl Jung the other day. And there in it, he mentions Rhine and some of the experiments. And Jung says, well, you won't be able to explain those phenomena with the usual tools that and these are the greatest tools, causality, notion of space-time. No, this is in terms of Jung, an acausal orderedness. And that's what it is. So it feels like once you go up a few steps or a few floors, the elements, the toolkits, they don't resemble what we're used to.
Very, very well put, Àlex. And Jose Sain Nasser, the great Iranian, tremendous philosopher, and all, he talks about this beautifully, that all of these tools we use only take us so far, because then Maya, the great illusion, plays its part. And those who deny illusion are the ones who are most deluded, so to speak, by it. Yes. So tools for the job.
Tools for the job.
Tools for the job. Yeah.
Yeah, but some of those tools, just to insist, and we can move on, some of
Yeah.
those tools seem so absolutely essential that
Yes.
we will not give them up. Like the same image.
Mm.
Yes, you can say, okay, I'm willing to give up this tool.
Yeah.
I'm willing to give up this tool.
Mm.
But are you willing to give up the floor on which you're standing?
Quite.
No,
No.
but I think that's what's required.
But
Like you
you
need to
have
give
to have the
up.
courage.
Yeah,
Mm.
if we take Jung in that case seriously, it's like if I was reading him, it's like, is he really saying we must put on hold causality? This is like giving up the floor on which we're standing.
Mm.
Wow, what a leap.
We must give up our concept of causality, put it
Yes,
that way. Yeah.
yes, okay,
Mm.
yeah.
Our concept of causality. Yeah,
Hmm.
definitely.
Well, what a journey,
Yeah,
Eddie.
wonderful, Alex. So I would not travel with anyone else, I promise you. I was not wearing my seatbelts because I had every confidence that if we turned a sharp corner, you would come to my rescue. I mean that.
All right. Well, talk to you soon and we'll continue.